400,000 years ago, in the grasslands of ancient Africa, a child shivers through another endless night. 8 out of every 10 children born will never see adulthood, claimed by the cold that stalks human settlements like an invisible predator. This is humanity's darkest chapter, when our ancestors huddle in caves, pressing their bodies together for warmth, while saber-toothed cats wait just beyond the darkness. The demographic nightmare is simple mathematics. Humans lose more heat than any comparable mammal, lacking fur, sufficient fat reserves, or the metabolic adaptations of our competitors. Elders die first when temperatures drop, taking their knowledge with them. Infants follow, their small bodies unable to maintain core temperature through the 14-hour nights. The archaeological record confirms this brutality through skeletal remains, showing growth interruption lines, physical evidence of near starvation, winters survived by children who would die in the next, cold season. But here's what the records don't tell us. How did our ancestors endure this frozen age for 300,000 years without abandoning hope? The fossil sites reveal the deaths but remain silent about the whispered prayers around cold caves, the lullabies sung to dying infants, the desperate experiments attempted and abandoned across countless generations. In this frozen world lives Tok, a peculiar young man from a tribe near present-day Kenya. While others hunt and gather, Tok obsesses over the blackened branches left by lightning strikes, carrying smouldering embers in hollow gourds lined with dried moss. His tribe considers him touched by spirits, not entirely wrong, as Tok sees patterns others miss. He notices how certain woods smoke longer, how morning dew kills embers but dry grass revives them. His systematic experiments with friction between different wood types mark humanity's first research program, though his tribe sees only wasted energy from someone who should be hunting. The name Tok itself comes from fragmentary linguistic reconstruction, traced backward through Proto-Afro-Asiatic roots, meaning the one who watches flame. Whether he existed as one individual or represents a composite of many fire-obsessed ancestors, the archaeological evidence suggests someone like him must have lived. The question that haunts researchers: what kind of mind could conceptualize creating fire in a world where fire existed only as divine punishment from the sky? The seasonal migration patterns reveal the desperate economics of pre-fire existence. Tribes must follow the sun, moving constantly between warm zones, never accumulating resources or developing permanent technologies. Each winter claims 30% of the population in the northern ranges, forcing survivors southward in massive refugee waves that trigger territorial conflicts. Cave paintings from this era, found in sites across Africa and southern Europe, depict scenes of mass movement, human figures flowing like water toward warmer territories. The artistic record suggests these migrations weren't orderly evacuations, but desperate flights from invisible death. The calories burned, just maintaining body temperature, equaled twice what humans need for all other activities combined. This energy deficit keeps our ancestors trapped in subsistence survival, unable to develop the surplus necessary for innovation. Modern experimental archaeology has replicated these conditions, with volunteers attempting to survive using only Paleolithic technologies. Without fire, subjects in temperate climates experienced severe hypothermia within 48 hours, even with constructed shelters and animal hide clothing. The mathematics are unforgiving. Human bodies radiate heat faster than any available food source can replace it during cold seasons. Tok's grandfather, the tribe's memory keeper, recites the names of 16 siblings lost to cold before their naming ceremonies, a common tragedy that defines human existence in this frozen age. These oral genealogies, preserved through repetition and rhythm, serve as humanity's first historical records. The names themselves carry meaning: dawn that never came, breath turned to ice, small hands gone blue. Each name a poem of grief, each recitation a reminder of winter's certainty. The mystery deepens when we examine the distribution of cold weather deaths across different age groups. Infants and elderly die predictably, but the archaeological record shows something stranger. Young adults in their prime, physically healthy, dying without apparent cause during extended cold periods. Modern researchers have identified a phenomenon called give-up-itis, where psychological despair triggers physiological collapse. Did our ancestors experience mass episodes of this condition during the worst winters? The bone chemistry suggests periods of profound stress, cortisol markers elevated to levels associated with trauma. But here's what haunts the excavation sites: the positioning of the bodies. In cave after cave, skeletal remains show family groups arranged in circular formations, adults surrounding children, even in death-maintaining protective positions. These weren't panicked deaths or epidemic casualties. These were people who lay down together, knowing what was coming, choosing to face the cold, as they had faced every other challenge, as one unit. The tools found in these death sites tell another story. Unfinished projects, partially carved implements, stones arranged in patterns suggesting early mathematical thinking. These weren't people who had given up on the future. These were innovators killed mid-thought, their ideas dying with them, the intellectual capital of humanity bleeding away winter after winter. How many potential firemakers froze before completing their insight? How many Toks died with the answer trapped in cooling minds? The climatological records from ice cores reveal the true scale of humanity's frozen age. For 300,000 years, temperature fluctuations created regular winter die-offs, a selective pressure so intense it should have driven our species to extinction, or forced rapid physiological adaptation. Yet humans neither died out nor evolved significant cold-weather biology. Instead, we waited. The question that archaeology cannot answer: what sustained hope across 12,000 generations of winter deaths? What made each new generation believe they might solve what their ancestors could not? Tok represents the culmination of this long waiting, but he also represents its mystery. The historical record suggests fire-making knowledge appeared suddenly across multiple sites within a relatively compressed time frame, 10 to 15,000 years, extraordinary speed for information dispersal in pre-literate societies. Did multiple Toks discover the technique independently, or did one discovery spread faster than seems possible? The burn patterns in ancient hearths show remarkable consistency in technique across vast distances, suggesting either shared knowledge or a solution so elegant that independent discoverers arrived at identical methods. The final mystery lies in what happened just before the breakthrough. Pollen analysis reveals unusual weather patterns in the millennia preceding widespread fire control, a period of extreme climatic instability that would have made traditional survival strategies unreliable. Perhaps crisis drove innovation. Perhaps desperation created the conditions where someone like Tok would be heard rather than dismissed. Or perhaps the answer is simpler and stranger. Perhaps humanity had always possessed the cognitive capability to create fire, but lacked the cultural permission to try until circumstances left no choice. As that African child shivers through another night 400,000 years ago, somewhere in the darkness, Tok watches embers glow in his gourd. He doesn't know he stands at the threshold of everything that will follow. He knows only cold, and the mad certainty that humans need not freeze. The storm arrives during the dry season, unusual and violent, setting the grassland ablaze with lightning strikes. Tok's tribe flees, but he lingers, mesmerized by the fire's behavior. He observes how flames jump between materials, how different plants burn at varying temperatures, how fire creates its own wind. The others scream for him to run, but Tok remains transfixed, his mind cataloguing patterns that will save humanity. When the tribe's leader demands he abandon his dangerous obsession, Tok chooses exile over conformity. The historical record preserves this moment through an unexpected source: genetic bottlenecks in African populations dating to this approximate period. Something caused dramatic population reductions followed by rapid expansion, suggesting social upheaval and reorganization. Anthropologists have long debated the cause, but the timing aligns perfectly with the emergence of fire-making technology. Perhaps Tok's exile wasn't unique. Perhaps the discovery of fire required a particular personality type, individuals willing to separate from group safety to pursue dangerous ideas. Armed with his gourd of embers and accumulated knowledge, Tok ventures into the wilderness, gambling everything on solving humanity's greatest puzzle. The archaeological sites from this era reveal scattered remains of solitary individuals, isolated from typical tribal burial patterns, their bones showing evidence of extended survival alone, something nearly impossible in the Paleolithic world. Were these the exiled innovators, the obsessive minds who chose knowledge over belonging? For 40 days, Tok maintains his carried flame while perfecting friction techniques observed in daily life. The heat from rubbing cold hands, the warmth where tree branches scrape in wind. But here's what the evidence suggests about those 40 days. They weren't spent in peaceful contemplation. Tok's camp, if the reconstructed site near Lake Turkana is indeed his, shows signs of multiple predator encounters, defensive barriers built and rebuilt, the scattered remains of scavenged meals. This wasn't a research retreat. This was survival at the edge of death, with only obsession keeping the flame of both life and innovation burning. His breakthrough comes through systematic elimination. Soft woods fail. Wet materials produce nothing. The discarded experimental tools found at potential Tok sites number in the hundreds, each representing a failed hypothesis, a technique attempted and abandoned. Modern fire-making experts who've replicated these experiments report the psychological toll. Hours of effort producing only blisters and frustration, the constant temptation to return to carried fire rather than pursue creation. That Tok persisted suggests either extraordinary determination or something closer to madness. But the combination of hard, ironwood spun against soft cedar, with tinder made from dried fungi, produces first smoke, then spark, then flame. The cognitive leap required is staggering. Understanding that fire isn't a thing but a process. That heat plus fuel plus air equals flame. This abstraction represents humanity's first scientific principle, discovered through methodical experimentation rather than accident. The implications extend beyond fire itself. Tok's mind had to conceptualize invisible causation, had to understand that observables resulted from unobservable interactions. This thinking pattern, this ability to theorize about processes rather than objects, marks the true revolution. Yet here's the mystery that archaeologists whisper about. The technique is almost too elegant. The bow drill method eventually developed requires understanding of rotational momentum, pressure distribution, and material science. It seems impossibly sophisticated for a first-generation technology. Some researchers suggest, earlier, cruder methods existed but left no trace. Others propose that fire-making knowledge was lost and rediscovered multiple times before finally taking hold. The burn marks in caves show false starts, abandoned hearths, sites where fire was achieved but not sustained. How many proto-Toks came close but failed to bridge the final gap? Tok's return coincides with an early winter that threatens his former tribe with extinction. The timing seems too perfect, almost mythological. But climate records confirm unusual cold snaps during this period, temperature drops of 10 to 15 degrees within single seasons. The dramatic confrontation between Tok and the elders unfolds as children lie dying from hypothermia. Imagine the scene. A man they'd exiled as mad, returning from impossible solitary survival, claiming to command the sun's power. His demonstration of friction fire, spinning the ironwood drill between his palms until smoke rises, then flame erupts from seemingly nothing, appears as pure magic. The witnesses, if we trust the oral traditions preserved through 12,000 generations, reported that time seemed to stop. The concept of human-made fire was so alien that observers initially couldn't process what they were seeing. The tribe's shaman declares it divine intervention, and perhaps this interpretation saved Tok's life. Had the elders understood this as purely human achievement, would they have killed him for threatening the cosmic order? But Tok insists anyone can learn. This moment, this choice to share rather than hoard, represents humanity's first open-source technology transfer. He could have become a fire priest, maintaining monopoly and power. Instead, he teaches. The implications of this decision ripple through all subsequent human history. Knowledge as shared resource rather than guarded secret becomes the default pattern, the foundation of cumulative cultural evolution. The night of first fire sees every adult attempting the technique, their success spreading through the camp as points of light multiplying like stars. The archaeological record captures this moment through a phenomenon researchers call the proliferation layer, a stratum, in multiple African sites showing sudden abundance of controlled fire use, dozens of hearths appearing where previously there were none. The chemical analysis reveals something stranger. These fires burned simultaneously, as if ignited in concert, a coordinated learning event. The elderly weep, knowing their grandchildren will survive winters they couldn't. Women calculate how cooking might preserve food through lean seasons. Warriors envision driving predators from better caves. The transformation is instant and irreversible. From this night forward, this tribe will never be without fire. But the oral traditions preserve another detail, darker and stranger. Some tribe members refused to learn. They insisted fire was divine gift, not human craft, and attempting to create it represented cosmic transgression. These fire refusers existed in the first generation and, according to fragmentary myths, in every generation after. Some mysteries run deeper than technique. The knowledge spreads through deliberate teaching and strategic sharing. Tok trains 5 apprentices in the precise hand movements, pressure requirements, and tinder preparation necessary for consistent fire creation. The number 5 appears repeatedly in fire origin myths across unrelated cultures, suggesting either historical truth or universal symbolic significance. These apprentices become humanity's first technical specialists, traded between allied tribes like precious resources. Within 3 generations, the friction fire technique reaches from Africa to the Levant, carried by refugees, traders, and marriage exchanges. The speed of this dispersal has puzzled researchers for decades. 3 generations equals roughly 75 years. The distance covered exceeds 4,000 miles through hostile terrain. Modern experimental reconstructions of Paleolithic travel suggest this should have taken 5 to 7 generations minimum. Yet the archaeological evidence is clear. Firemaking appears across this entire range within a compressed timeframe. Some researchers propose a fire road, a deliberate relay system where tribes passed knowledge specifically to spread this capability as rapidly as possible. Others suggest crisis-driven migration, populations fleeing climate change and carrying fire knowledge as survival equipment. A third theory, less discussed in academic papers but whispered in field camps, suggests the technique was so transformative that groups possessing it experienced population explosions so dramatic they expanded territorially at unprecedented rates, carrying firemaking to new regions through conquest rather than cooperation. The demographic impact is immediate. Winter mortality drops from 80% to 20% within tribes possessing fire mastery. This population explosion drives territorial expansion, as growing tribes require new hunting grounds and resources. The genetic record shows exactly this pattern: population bottleneck followed by explosive diversification, the signature of groups surviving a near-extinction event and then thriving beyond previous limits. But here's what the 100 days that changed everything really changed: human consciousness itself. Before Tok, humans were subject to nature's whims, passengers in a world of uncontrollable forces. After Tok, humans became agents of transformation, beings who could impose will upon matter. This psychological shift, invisible in the archaeological record but evident in every technology that follows, represents the true revolution. Fire didn't just warm bodies, it ignited the idea that humans could reshape reality through understanding and effort. The final mystery remains: what happened to Tok himself? No burial site has been definitively identified. No skeletal remains bear markers matching his reconstructed biography. The oral traditions diverge. Some claim he walked into fire and became flame itself, others that he lived to impossible age, still others that he simply disappeared once his work was complete. Perhaps the truth is simpler. Perhaps Tok was never one person, but a personification of human ingenuity, a name we gave to the collective breakthrough that saved our species. Or perhaps he lived, taught, and died like anyone else, and we've spent 400,000 years trying to make legend match the magnitude of what that one mind accomplished. As flame spreads from camp to camp across the ancient world, somewhere in the darkness, the next innovation gestates. Fire is only the beginning. The century following Tok's discovery witnesses humanity's first arms race as fire mastery creates unprecedented power imbalances. Tribes with fire systematically absorb or eliminate those without, not through malice but through simple survival advantages. Fire-wielding groups survive harsh seasons, accumulate resources, and support larger populations. They develop new weapons, fire-hardened spears that penetrate deeper, torches that turn night raids devastating, smoke signals that coordinate hunting parties across vast distances. The archaeological evidence for these fire wars appears in the bone record as a sudden increase in violent trauma around 390,000 years before Christ. Skulls show impact fractures from harder weapons. Settlement sites reveal burned-out caves, their walls blackened not by cooking fires but by deliberate destruction. Mass graves appear for the first time in human history. Dozens of individuals buried together without ceremony, the signature of conflict casualties. But here's what disturbs modern researchers. Many of these victims show no defensive wounds. They weren't fighting, they were fleeing. The psychological warfare is equally decisive. Approaching, enemies see smoke rising from camps and know they face humans who have tamed the sun itself. The terror this inspired cannot be overstated. Imagine encountering fire wielders for the first time, watching them casually create flame from nothing, seeing them move fearlessly through darkness with burning brands. To fireless tribes, these beings appeared superhuman, God-touched, unstoppable. Many groups surrendered without resistance, trading autonomy for fire knowledge and protection. Yet the pattern of conquest reveals something unexpected. Unlike later imperial expansions, fire-bearing tribes didn't typically slaughter those they encountered. Instead, they integrated them, taught them fire-making, and absorbed them into growing populations. The genetic record shows repeated mixing events during this period, suggesting deliberate intermarriage and cultural exchange. Perhaps fire's power was so overwhelming that actual violence became unnecessary, or perhaps those who controlled fire understood something profound. Knowledge grows stronger when shared, populations thrive through diversity, and survival favors cooperation over domination. The Firekeepers emerge as humanity's first specialist class, guards of both technique and flame, who command respect equal to chiefs. These primarily female specialists maintain eternal fires in sacred caves, experiment with different fuel combinations, and discover that animal fat extends burn time while specific herbs create medicinal smokes. The gender pattern here intrigues researchers. In most Paleolithic societies, roles divided along hunting and gathering lines, but firekeeping transcended this structure. Women who might be pregnant or nursing could tend flames without endangering themselves or their children. The knowledge became hereditary, passed from mother to daughter through elaborate initiation rituals. But the oral traditions preserved in cultures worldwide suggest the firekeepers were more than technicians. They were shamans, judges, and memory holders. They decided who could take fire for new settlements. They mediated disputes by threatening to withhold flame. They maintained the songs and stories that preserved tribal history. In some traditions, they could condemn criminals by prohibiting them from approaching any fire, an exile sentence equivalent to death. The power they wielded was absolute, yet the archaeological record shows no evidence of firekeeper tyranny. Perhaps the responsibility of keeping humanity alive tempered the temptation toward abuse. They discover that certain stones spark when struck, that pine resin waterproofs torches, that different colored flames predict weather changes. The accumulated knowledge represents humanity's first technical manual, preserved through song and ceremony. Modern attempts to reconstruct these fire songs from fragmentary linguistic evidence reveal sophisticated mnemonic devices. Each verse encodes practical information: wood types, tinder, preparation, weather indicators, safety protocols. The rhythm and rhyme made transmission accurate across generations, but here's the mystery. The complexity suggests centuries of refinement, yet fire-making itself only existed for decades at this point. How did such elaborate knowledge systems develop so rapidly? Some researchers propose that the cognitive frameworks already existed, used for preserving hunting knowledge and migration routes, and were simply adapted for firekeeping. Others suggest the songs preserve much older wisdom about carried fire, predating Tok's breakthrough by millennia. A third possibility: darker and more intriguing. Perhaps fire-making was discovered, lost, and rediscovered multiple times throughout human history, and the songs preserve knowledge from these earlier, forgotten eras. The economic revolution triggered by fire control reshapes human society within 5 generations. Cooking increases caloric extraction from meat by 40% and makes toxicized 40% previously toxic plants edible, exploding the available food supply. The 2 hours of daily food preparation time cooking requires is offset by 4 hours less chewing raw meat, creating humanity's first leisure time. This surplus enables specialization: tool makers, hide workers, storytellers. The division of labor that defines all subsequent civilization begins around the first cooking fires. Fire-based technologies compound rapidly. Heated stones crack nuts previously too hard to open. Smoke preserves meat through summer months. Hardened wooden tools enable deeper digging for roots and water. Each innovation builds on previous discoveries, creating exponential technological acceleration. The archaeological sites from this period show tool diversity exploding from a dozen standard implements to over 100 specialized variations within a few generations. This isn't gradual evolution. This is a species discovering that problems can be solved through invention. But here's what the settlement patterns reveal. Not all innovations spread evenly. Certain techniques remain localized for centuries, suggesting either deliberate knowledge hoarding or cultural barriers to transmission. Fire-hardening techniques appear in African sites 2,000 years before reaching European populations. Smoke preservation develops independently in 3 separate regions. Fat rendering shows up sporadically, suggesting the technique was discovered, forgotten, and rediscovered multiple times. The pattern indicates something crucial. Possessing fire didn't automatically grant technological sophistication. Innovation required specific social conditions, particular minds, chance discoveries. Fire was necessary but not sufficient for advancement. The settlement patterns that emerge around optimal fire resources create humanity's first permanent addresses. Caves near dead forests provide shelter plus fuel. Flint deposits become strategic resources worth defending. The intersection of water, wood, and wind protection determines where humans establish base camps that will become villages, then cities. Modern urban archaeology has identified this pattern. Cities built on Paleolithic firekeeping sites, their locations chosen 300,000 years ago by ancestors optimizing for flame maintenance. The same geographical advantages that made locations ideal for fire maintenance 400,000 years ago still influence modern urban centers. Paris sits where ancient firekeepers found perfect cave systems along the Seine, with limestone cliffs providing shelter and river drift providing fuel. London rises where Thames riverside camps offered driftwood and wind protection in a bend that created a natural harbour. Beijing occupies caves that provided both firekeeping opportunities and defensive positions. These patterns, invisible to modern inhabitants, began with decisions about where to maintain humanity's first flames. But the map of ancient firekeeping sites reveals gaps. Vast regions suitable for firekeeping that show no evidence of permanent settlement. Some researchers attribute this to incomplete archaeological coverage, arguing that sites remain undiscovered. Others propose that certain regions were deliberately avoided, perhaps due to cultural taboos or territorial agreements between tribes. A third possibility haunts the excavation sites. Maybe these empty zones were settled, but experienced complete population collapse, their inhabitants and all traces of their existence erased by catastrophes the survivors chose not to record. The fire wars themselves remain frustratingly obscure in the archaeological record. We know they happened. The evidence of violence and rapid population movement is undeniable, but the details remain shadowy. How many tribes were destroyed? How many refugees fled into marginal territories? How many firekeeping lineages ended in slaughter? The burn layers in caves could represent cooking fires or conquest fires. The scattered bones could indicate warfare or disease or simple burial customs we don't understand. One site in particular obsesses researchers, a cave complex in Kenya showing evidence of massive fire use followed by sudden abandonment around 385,000 years before Christ. The cave could house 200 individuals comfortably, sits near fresh water and good hunting grounds, and shows sophisticated fire-keeping infrastructure. Then, nothing. The inhabitants vanished, leaving behind tools, food stores, and dozens of hearths that burned out and were never relit. What happened there? Raiders? Disease? Internal conflict? The silence of the stones preserves a mystery that may never be solved. The century of fire wars ends not with peace treaties but with saturation. Fire knowledge becomes so widespread that the advantage disappears. Tribes reach equilibrium where all possess fire, forcing competition to shift to other domains. Better tools, richer territories, larger populations. But the legacy remains in human consciousness. We learned that knowledge equals power, that technology determines survival, that those who control innovation control the future. Every arms race since, from bronze weapons to nuclear arsenals, echoes humanity's first experience discovering that some advantages change everything. As the fires of war cool into the fires of civilization, humanity stands transformed. We are no longer victims of the cold. We are the species that commands flame. But commanding flame means commanding destruction, and the same power that warms children can burn enemies. The dual nature of fire, creator and destroyer, establishes a pattern that will define every technology that follows. Progress and peril, advancement and danger, salvation and doom, forever intertwined in the dancing flames. The mastery of fire triggers cascading biological and cultural changes that transform Homo erectus into Homo sapiens over 200,000 years. Cooking softens food, reducing the energy required for digestion by 60%. This metabolic savings redirects calories to brain development, with human brain size increasing 20% within 50,000 years of widespread cooking. Our jaws shrink, our teeth become smaller, our intestines shorten by 2 meters, evolutionary changes directly traceable to processed food. The ability to extract more nutrition from less food enables humans to support the energy-expensive neural tissue that defines our species. The skeletal record documents this transformation with unsettling precision. Skulls from 300,000 years before Christ show robust jaws and heavy grinding teeth. By 200,000 years before Christ, these features have diminished significantly. By 100,000 years before Christ, human skulls are recognizably modern. This isn't gradual drift. This is selection pressure so intense it reshapes our species in evolutionary fast-forward. But here's what troubles biological anthropologists. The speed seems impossible. Standard evolutionary models suggest changes this dramatic require millions of years, not hundreds of thousands. Yet the bones don't lie. Some researchers propose that cooking created feedback loops that accelerated evolution beyond normal rates. Smaller jaws meant more space for brain expansion. Larger brains enabled better tool-making and more sophisticated cooking techniques. Better cooking freed additional calories for brain growth. The cycle compounds, each generation slightly smarter and slightly more gracile than the last. But other scientists whisper about what the mainstream won't publish. Perhaps fire didn't cause these changes. Perhaps the changes were already underway, and fire simply allowed a new human morphology to survive that would have died in the frozen age. Fire becomes the cornerstone of human consciousness, embedded in every language and mythology. Proto-Indo-European root words for fire appear in sacred contexts across all derivative languages. Greeks gift humanity Prometheus's stolen flame, his punishment eternal for sharing divine power with mortals. Hindus worship Agni, the fire god who consumes offerings and carries prayers to heaven. Zoroastrians maintain eternal flames for 3,000 years, their religion centered entirely on fire's sacred nature. The metaphors of fire, passion, inspiration, life force shape how humans conceptualize existence itself. But the universality of fire worship raises questions. Why does every culture, separated by oceans and millennia, venerate flame with such consistency? The standard explanation suggests convergent cultural evolution. All humans descend from fire-using ancestors, so all preserve fire's importance. Yet the specific parallels are striking. Fire as divine gift, stolen or granted. Fire as bridge between human and divine. Fire as purifier, destroyer, and renewer. These aren't generic associations. These are detailed mythological frameworks that appear worldwide with suspicious consistency. Some comparative mythologists propose a Ur-myth, an original fire story from which all others descend, preserved from the moment Tok first created flame. They point to recurring elements: the firebringer as outsider or exile, the resistance from tribal elders, the transformative night when fire spreads. Perhaps we're not looking at convergent evolution but preserved memory. The true story of humanity's greatest revolution encoded in myth and passed forward through 400,000 years. Or perhaps something stranger. Perhaps fire really was stolen from the gods, and we've spent history trying to justify the theft. Birthday candles, Olympic torches, and memorial flames reveal how deeply fire symbolism penetrates modern culture, each ritual echoing that first night when Tok's tribe gathered around their self-made flame. We light candles to mark years survived. Unconsciously honoring ancestors for whom each winter survived was miraculous. We carry torches between cities to represent shared civilization, repeating the fire road that spread knowledge across continents. We maintain eternal flames for fallen soldiers, a practice dating to firekeepers who never let sacred flames die. These aren't arbitrary traditions. These are memory crystallized into ritual, the shape of our deepest history pressed into present ceremony. The compound innovations enabled by fire accelerate human development exponentially. 70,000 years ago, cooking's nutritional boost potentially triggers the cognitive revolution that produces art, complex language, and abstract thinking. The cave paintings that appear suddenly at this period show minds capable of symbolic representation, of capturing essence rather than merely depicting reality. The oldest confirmed art, ochre patterns in Blombos Cave, dates to exactly this period. Coincidence or causation? Did the final neural development enabled by millennia of cooked food finally push human consciousness across a threshold into true abstraction? 20,000 years ago, fired ceramics enable food storage that makes agriculture possible. The first pottery appears in China, crude vessels that nonetheless represent a conceptual breakthrough. Fire can transform earth into new materials. Clay becomes stone, liquid becomes solid. The principle, once understood, extends to metallurgy, glassmaking, and every transformative technology that follows. But here's the mystery. Pottery appears, disappears, and reappears across millennia before finally taking hold. The technique was discovered at least 6 separate times in different regions before becoming permanent technology. Why? What prevented earlier adoptions? What finally changed to make pottery stick? 10,000 years ago, controlled burns clear forests for farming. The agricultural revolution that ends nomadic existence begins with fire. Humans burn clearings, plant seeds in ash-enriched soil, and discover that fire can reshape landscapes. The pollen record from this period shows dramatic vegetation changes, forests giving way to grasslands, natural ecosystems replaced by managed environments. This is terraforming, humanity taking planetary-scale control of our environment. The psychological shift required is enormous. From accepting nature's gifts to demanding nature's submission. From living within ecosystems to creating them. 5,000 years ago, metallurgy born from fire transforms warfare and agriculture simultaneously. Bronze weapons end the Stone Age and begin the arms race that continues today. Iron plows break soil that wooden tools couldn't penetrate, enabling population explosions that fuel empires. Every subsequent revolution, industrial, digital, space age, depends on combustion, from steam engines to rocket fuel to the fossil fuels powering server farms that run artificial intelligence systems that may soon surpass human cognition. The chain of causation runs unbroken from Tok's first friction spark to the present moment. But each revolution brings costs invisible in their moment. Controlled burns that cleared forests for agriculture began soil depletion that continues today. Metallurgy required deforestation that left Bronze Age civilizations resource-depleted and vulnerable to collapse. Industrial combustion changed atmospheric chemistry in ways we're still struggling to address. The pattern repeats. Fire solves immediate problems while creating delayed consequences. We are 400,000 years into an experiment with no control group, unable to know what humanity would have become without flame. Tok's legacy reaches beyond technology into the fundamental structure of human society. The hearth becomes humanity's first architectural focus, with dwellings designed around central fire pits that remain standard until electricity. Roman homes organized around the sacred hearth goddess Vesta. Medieval castles featured great halls centered on massive fireplaces. Even modern homes, heated by invisible systems, retain vestigial fireplaces as focal points. We no longer need the heat, but we still need the symbol. The fire that saved us remains the center around which we organize our lives. The gathering around evening fires creates humanity's first formal education system, where stories preserve knowledge across generations. Every oral culture, from Aboriginal Australians to Norse Vikings, maintains teaching traditions conducted around flames. The firelight creates intimacy, the darkness focuses attention, the warmth relaxes listeners into receptive states. Modern pedagogy has largely abandoned this model, but experiments show students retain information significantly better when taught in firelit settings compared to electric lighting. Perhaps our brains remain optimized for learning around flames, our neural architecture still shaped by 300,000 years of fireside education. The need to maintain fires overnight establishes shift work and collaborative responsibility. Someone must feed flames during sleeping hours, creating humanity's first watch systems, first guard duties, first cooperative labor divisions. These patterns extend into agriculture, where seasonal demands create harvest crews, into military organization, where watch rotations protect sleeping soldiers, into industrial factories, where shift work maximizes production. The 24-hour society we inhabit today traces directly to the simple necessity of keeping fires alive through darkness. The 60% reduction in infant mortality from cold enables the extended childhood that allows complex learning, making possible the cultural transmission that defines human advancement. Children who would have died now survive to learn, accumulate knowledge, and transmit it forward. The demographic explosion that follows fire mastery means each generation has more teachers and more students, exponentially increasing the rate at which culture evolves. This acceleration continues today, knowledge doubling at ever shorter intervals, the compound returns on Tok's discovery still accumulating after 400 millennia. That single innovation, creating fire from friction, generates returns still compounding today. Every heated home, every cooked meal, every combustion engine traces its lineage to one peculiar man who refused to accept that humanity must forever remain cold. The 80% reduction in cold deaths didn't just save lives, it created the demographic foundation for all human civilization. Without fire, we would have remained marginal scavengers in tropical zones, unable to expand into temperate regions, unable to support the population densities that enable cities, unable to develop the surplus resources that fund art and science and philosophy. But here's the final mystery that fire's mastery reveals. We still don't fully understand it. Combustion chemistry involves quantum mechanics, plasma physics, and complex molecular interactions that challenge modern science. The flames Tok created 400,000 years ago contain processes we're still struggling to model mathematically. We harnessed fire millennia before comprehending it, proof that humans can master what we don't understand, that application precedes theory, that survival trumps knowledge. The Keeper of Shadows stands at the threshold between firelight and darkness, watching flames dance as they've danced since Tok's first spark. In those flames we see our past. The child shivering through frozen nights, the exile gambling everything on impossible insight, the first nervous hands spinning wood against wood, the explosion of light into darkness, the eternal flames that guard our history. In those flames we see our future. The fires will ignite among distant stars, the combustion that will power our species beyond this planet, or the flames that might consume us if we fail to respect their power. 400,000 years ago, a peculiar man named Tok refused to accept the cold. His refusal changed everything. His legacy burns in every flame we light, every innovation we pursue, every impossible problem we decide to solve, despite everyone insisting we're mad for trying. We are the fire makers, the children of Tok, the species that looked at nature's greatest power and decided to claim it for ourselves. The flames dance on, eternal as human ambition, bright as our dreams, dangerous as our pride. And in the darkness beyond the firelight, new mysteries wait, calling to those strange minds who, like Tok, cannot help but try to illuminate what others accept as perpetual shadow. The fire burns. It always will, because we made it so.